A strong woman learns early, sometimes painfully, that not every truth needs to be spoken aloud to be honored. There comes a moment in her psychological development when she realizes that explaining herself repeatedly does not bring clarity, peace, or respect. Instead, it often dilutes her authority. Behavioral psychology shows us that people who over-explain are often perceived as uncertain, even when they are not. The need to explain usually comes from a desire to be understood, validated, or accepted. But strength begins when a woman understands that her worth does not depend on another person's comprehension. She does not owe her inner world to anyone who has not earned access to it. Walking away without explaining is not avoidance. It is discernment. It is the quiet recognition that some conversations reduce rather than elevate the self. From a psychological perspective, explanation becomes unnecessary when patterns are already clear. Strong women observe behavior more than words. They notice consistency, tone, timing, and energy. When someone repeatedly shows disrespect, emotional negligence, or manipulation, explaining why you are leaving often serves only one purpose: to give the other person more information to argue against. The human brain, especially when defensive, does not process explanations as insight but as threats to identity. This is why explanations so often lead to debates, gaslighting, or blame shifting. A strong woman understands this dynamic instinctively. She knows that clarity has already occurred within her. She does not need agreement to validate her decision. Her silence is not confusion, it is resolution. Self-respect is deeply tied to emotional economy. Every explanation costs energy. Every justification leaks power. Psychology teaches us that power is felt more than spoken. When a woman repeatedly explains her boundaries, she unconsciously trains others to believe those boundaries are negotiable. Strong women do not negotiate their dignity. They understand that boundaries are not requests. They are statements of self-definition. Explaining too much signals uncertainty about one's own standards. Walking away quietly signals something else entirely: finality. It communicates that the internal decision has already been made, and no external input is required. This is not coldness. It is emotional maturity. Many women are conditioned to explain themselves excessively. Social psychology shows that women are often rewarded for being accommodating, empathetic, and emotionally transparent, even at the cost of their own well-being. Strong women unlearn this conditioning. They recognize that constant explanation is a survival strategy, not a strength. It is born from the fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or labeled negatively. But strength is the willingness to be misunderstood in order to remain aligned with oneself. A woman who walks away without explaining has reached a level of internal security where she no longer needs to manage other people's perceptions. She understands that clarity offered to the wrong audience becomes self-betrayal. Explanation weakens self-respect when it is given to those who have already demonstrated a lack of care. Psychology refers to this as emotional overinvestment. When you explain yourself to someone who is not emotionally safe, you are placing your inner logic into hands that may misuse it. Strong women are selective with access. They know that not everyone deserves to know their reasons, their wounds, or their thresholds. Silence, in this context, is a boundary. It protects the nervous system from unnecessary conflict and preserves dignity. Walking away becomes an act of self-regulation, not reaction. There is also a deeper psychological mechanism at play: the illusion of control. Many people explain themselves because they believe it will change the outcome, fix the relationship, or make the other person behave differently. Strong women have learned, often through experience, that explanations rarely change entrenched behavior. They accept reality as it is, not as it could be if someone finally understood. This acceptance is not pessimism, it is clarity. It allows them to conserve emotional energy and redirect it toward their own growth. Walking away without explaining is the moment a woman stops trying to control external responses and starts honoring internal truth. Emotional discipline is the foundation of this behavior. Strong women do not act from impulse. They do not storm out dramatically or deliver long speeches hoping for closure. They understand that closure is an internal process, not a conversation. Behavioral psychology emphasizes that the brain seeks resolution, but resolution does not always come from dialogue. Sometimes it comes from decision. Silence can be more regulating than words. It allows emotions to settle rather than escalate. When a woman walks away calmly without explanation, she is demonstrating mastery over her emotional impulses. She is choosing peace over performance. Walking away without explaining is also a response to disrespect, not confusion. Strong women are not unclear about their needs, they are clear about their limits. When those limits are crossed repeatedly, explanation becomes redundant. Psychology tells us that repeated violations of boundaries activate stress responses in the body. The nervous system learns that engagement equals harm. At that point, withdrawal becomes the healthiest response. A strong woman listens to this signal. She does not stay to justify her pain. She leaves to protect her stability. This is not emotional withdrawal. It is self-preservation. There is a quiet authority in not needing the last word. Strong women understand that power does not announce itself. It moves decisively and without spectacle. When a woman explains herself endlessly, she is still seeking permission. When she walks away silently, she has already granted herself permission. This shift marks a profound psychological transition from external validation to internal alignment. She no longer needs to convince anyone that her feelings are valid. She knows they are. Her actions reflect that knowing more clearly than any explanation ever could. Psychologically, silence after decision creates asymmetry. It removes the opportunity for manipulation, argument, or emotional reversal. Strong women are aware of this, even if subconsciously. They know that explaining opens doors that should remain closed. It invites negotiation where there should be none. Walking away without explaining closes the door gently but firmly. It says, "This no longer aligns with me," without saying anything at all. That clarity is felt, even if it is not liked. A strong woman also understands timing. She knows that explanations given at the wrong moment are wasted. When emotions are high, defensiveness dominates. Words lose their precision. Silence, however, remains intact. It cannot be distorted or misquoted. It stands on its own. Walking away without explaining preserves the integrity of the decision. It prevents the woman from saying more than she means or revealing more than she should. This restraint is a hallmark of emotional intelligence. Ultimately, walking away without explaining is an act of self-loyalty. It is the moment a woman chooses her own nervous system over someone else's comfort. It reflects an internal hierarchy where self-respect ranks above approval. Strong women are not cruel when they do this. They are honest. Honest with themselves about what they will no longer tolerate. Honest about the fact that not every ending needs an explanation to be valid. Some endings are self-evident. This kind of strength does not come from arrogance or emotional shutdown. It comes from clarity earned through experience. Strong women have explained before. They have tried to be understood. They have waited, hoped, and articulated. Walking away without explaining is what happens after all that effort has been exhausted. It is not the first response, it is the final one. And it carries with it a calm certainty that no further discussion is required. As a woman develops emotional clarity, she begins to understand that internal validation is the axis around which all stability turns. The need to explain dissolves when self-trust becomes solid. Behavioral psychology shows that people who trust their internal judgments experience less anxiety when making firm decisions. Strong women cultivate this trust intentionally. They listen to patterns, not promises. They notice how they feel after interactions, not how things sound in theory. When a decision forms inside with clarity, there is no urgency to defend it. Explanation is often an externalized form of doubt. When doubt is gone, words become optional. Internal validation means a woman no longer looks outside herself to confirm what she already knows. She does not need someone else to agree in order to feel grounded. This is a significant psychological shift. Many people stay in unhealthy dynamics because they are waiting for the other person to finally get it. Strong women stop waiting. They understand that insight cannot be forced. If someone lacks the emotional capacity to understand, explaining only deepens frustration. Emotional clarity allows a woman to recognize the limits of others without internalizing them as personal failures. Walking away without explaining is her way of honoring reality rather than fighting it. Psychologically, strong women are skilled at separating intention from impact. They know they can have pure intentions and still experience harm. They also understand that explaining intentions does not erase impact. This awareness brings calm decisiveness. Instead of arguing about motives, they assess outcomes. If the outcome consistently undermines their peace, self-worth, or growth, the decision becomes clear. No explanation is needed because the conclusion is rooted in self-observation, not accusation. This removes emotional chaos from the process. The withdrawal is clean, not charged. Emotional discipline plays a central role here. Strong women do not react from wounded pride or anger. They pause, they reflect, they regulate. Psychology teaches that emotional regulation is the ability to choose responses rather than be driven by impulses. Walking away quietly requires more discipline than confrontation. It requires restraint, patience, and confidence. A woman who can remain calm while disengaging is demonstrating mastery over her emotional world. She is not suppressing feelings. She is directing them inward for processing rather than outward for performance. Internal validation also means accepting discomfort without outsourcing it. Explaining often serves as an attempt to relieve internal tension by making someone else acknowledge it. Strong women tolerate discomfort without needing immediate relief. They allow themselves to feel sadness, disappointment, or grief privately. This containment builds resilience. Psychology shows that individuals who can sit with discomfort without external validation develop stronger emotional endurance. Walking away without explaining is not emotional avoidance. It is emotional containment. The feelings are felt, just not displayed for negotiation. As clarity deepens, strong women become precise with their energy. They understand that attention is a resource. Where attention goes, energy follows. Explaining drains attention toward the past, toward what went wrong, toward who did not listen. Walking away redirects attention toward the future. This shift is subtle but powerful. It signals a woman's commitment to growth over justification. She is no longer invested in convincing others of her reality. She is invested in building a life that aligns with it. There is also an important cognitive aspect at play: narrative control. When a woman explains herself, she often unconsciously hands over the authority to reinterpret her story. The listener may distort, minimize, or weaponize her words. Strong women are aware of this risk. They protect their narrative by limiting access. Silence prevents misrepresentation. It preserves the integrity of her experience. Walking away without explaining is a way of saying, "My story does not require your interpretation to be valid." Internal validation allows a woman to release the need for fairness in how she is perceived. This is a difficult psychological milestone. Many people explain themselves because they want to be seen as reasonable, kind, or justified. Strong women accept that they may be misunderstood. They accept that someone else may create a story that paints them unfavorably, and they do not chase correction. Psychology tells us that trying to control others' perceptions often leads to chronic stress and rumination. Letting go of that control creates psychological freedom. Strong women also understand the difference between communication and over-communication. Healthy communication happens when there is mutual respect, emotional safety, and willingness to listen. Over-communication happens when one side is trying to compensate for the other's lack of accountability or empathy. When communication becomes one-sided, explanation becomes self-erasure. Emotional clarity helps a woman recognize when dialogue has stopped being productive. At that point, silence is not withdrawal, it is wisdom. This internal clarity changes how a woman experiences endings. She does not dramatize them. She does not seek emotional closure from someone who could not offer emotional presence. Closure becomes an internal decision rather than a mutual agreement. Psychology supports this. Closure is a cognitive process of meaning-making, not a conversational outcome. Strong women complete this process internally. They reflect, integrate lessons, and move forward. Walking away without explaining is simply the external expression of an internal conclusion. Internal validation also fosters self-compassion. A strong woman does not shame herself for leaving quietly. She does not label herself as cold or uncaring. She understands that compassion includes protecting oneself from further harm. She allows herself to choose peace without apology. This self-compassion stabilizes her nervous system and reinforces trust in her decisions. Over time, this creates a calm confidence that does not need reinforcement from others. As emotional clarity strengthens, strong women become less reactive to provocation. They do not take bait. They do not engage in circular arguments designed to exhaust them. Psychology shows that disengagement from provocation is a sign of high emotional intelligence. Walking away without explaining removes the reward of reaction. It deprives unhealthy dynamics of fuel. This is not passive behavior. It is strategic restraint. It reflects a woman's understanding of cause and effect within emotional systems. Strong women also recognize that explanation can sometimes be a form of self-abandonment. When they explain repeatedly, they are often overriding their own intuition in hopes of maintaining connection. Emotional clarity brings an end to this pattern. A woman learns to honor her intuition even when it leads to separation. She understands that alignment with self is more important than attachment to what no longer fits. Walking away without explaining becomes an act of alignment, not loss. This clarity reshapes a woman's identity. She no longer sees herself as someone who must persuade others of her worth. She sees herself as someone who chooses environments that recognize it naturally. This identity shift reduces anxiety, people-pleasing, and emotional overextension. It allows her to move through life with quiet assurance. Her decisions become less reactive and more intentional. Silence becomes a language of self-trust. Internal validation also brings patience. Strong women are not in a rush to prove anything. They understand that time reveals truth more clearly than arguments ever could. They let their absence communicate what words would only complicate. Psychology supports this understanding. Behavior communicates boundaries more effectively than explanation. Walking away creates a behavioral boundary that is unmistakable. It does not invite debate. It stands as a fact. Ultimately, emotional clarity and internal validation free a woman from the exhausting cycle of justification. She no longer needs to perform emotional labor for those who did not offer emotional safety. She chooses herself without announcement. She withdraws without hostility. She moves on without needing permission. This is the quiet strength that defines her presence. It is not loud, defensive, or dramatic. It is steady, grounded, and deeply rooted in self-respect. When a strong woman fully embodies her strength, it no longer shows up as resistance or explanation, but as quiet, decisive movement. She does not argue her way out of situations that drain her. She leaves them. Psychology tells us that the most stable individuals are not those who fight hardest, but those who choose their environments carefully. Calm withdrawal is not weakness. It is the highest form of self-direction. A woman who can disengage without hostility demonstrates emotional authority. She does not need to prove her power. She expresses it through choice. There is dignity in restraint. Strong women understand that not every situation deserves their emotional presence. They recognize when engagement will cost more than it gives. Behavioral psychology emphasizes that healthy decision-making involves minimizing unnecessary emotional expenditure. Walking away without explaining conserves energy and preserves self-respect. It reflects an understanding that some doors must be closed quietly to prevent further damage. This restraint is not indifference. It is intentional self-protection rooted in awareness. Calm withdrawal also communicates finality without aggression. It does not escalate conflict or invite pursuit. It simply removes access. Strong women know that access is the currency of relationships. When they withdraw it calmly, they send a clear signal without confrontation. This form of boundary setting is deeply effective because it cannot be negotiated. Psychology shows that behavior sets boundaries more clearly than words. Silence, paired with action, becomes unmistakable. A strong woman's dignity is felt in how she exits, not in how loudly she explains. She understands that dramatic exits often leave emotional residue, while quiet ones create closure. Calm withdrawal allows her nervous system to settle rather than stay activated. It avoids the spike of adrenaline that confrontation brings. Over time, this pattern strengthens emotional stability. She learns that peace is not something to be demanded, it is something to be chosen. Strong women also understand that explaining can entangle them further in dynamics they are trying to leave. Every explanation opens another thread of dialogue, another chance for misunderstanding, another emotional pull backward. Decisive action closes loops. Psychology refers to this as cognitive closure through behavior. When a woman acts decisively, her mind follows. The absence of explanation prevents rumination and second-guessing. It reinforces the decision internally as well as externally. This embodiment of strength changes how a woman carries herself. She becomes grounded, measured, and observant. She no longer feels compelled to correct every false narrative or defend every decision. She understands that people who matter will notice her consistency, not her explanations. Those who do not were never her audience. This detachment from unnecessary validation creates a quiet confidence that others can sense. It is not intimidating. It is self-contained. Calm withdrawal also protects a woman's future self. Strong women think beyond the immediate emotional moment. They consider how their actions will feel later, not just now. Explaining often brings temporary relief, but long-term regret. Silence may feel uncomfortable initially, but it preserves dignity over time. Psychology shows that delayed gratification and long-term thinking are markers of emotional maturity. Walking away without explaining is a future-oriented decision. There is also an element of self-leadership in this behavior. Strong women lead themselves before they try to influence others. They do not wait for external permission to act in alignment with their values. They do not seek consensus when their boundaries have already been crossed. Self-leadership means making decisions that protect integrity even when they are unpopular. Calm withdrawal is a leadership act directed inward. It says, "I will not abandon myself to maintain connection." As a woman embodies this strength, her presence becomes lighter. She carries fewer unresolved conversations, fewer emotional debts, fewer explanations waiting to be understood. This lightness is not apathy, it is clarity. She knows where she stands. She knows what she tolerates. She knows when to leave. This certainty allows her to move forward without dragging the past behind her. Psychology tells us that unresolved emotional conflict consumes cognitive resources. Calm exits free those resources for growth. Strong women also accept that not everyone will understand their silence. They make peace with that. They understand that understanding is not required for respect. In fact, boundaries often generate more respect when they are non-negotiable. Walking away without explaining removes the opportunity for others to test, push, or erode those boundaries. It teaches people how to treat her without her having to say a word. This strength is quiet, but it is not passive, it is deliberate. It is the result of self-awareness, emotional discipline, and self-respect woven together. A woman who embodies this strength does not harden. She softens inwardly while becoming firm outwardly. She remains kind, but not accessible to harm. She remains open, but not unguarded. Calm withdrawal becomes her way of maintaining this balance. Ultimately, strong women walk away without explaining because they trust themselves. They trust their perceptions. They trust their limits. They trust their limits. They trust that their life does not require universal agreement to be valid. They do not need to convince, persuade, or justify. Their actions speak with quiet authority. When they leave, they do so with dignity intact, emotions regulated, and self-respect preserved. This is not the strength of avoidance or silence born from fear. It is the strength of alignment. It is the strength of alignment. It is a woman choosing peace over proving, clarity over chaos, and self-respect over attachment. She walks away not because she cannot speak, but because she no longer needs to. And in that choice, she demonstrates the most powerful form of authority there is, the authority to choose herself calmly, fully, and without explanation.